Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Today on CityCast, Boise. Idaho's abortion laws have made national headlines, and now a citizen-led initiative is fighting back. We're diving into the campaign to bring reproductive rights to the ballot and how they're organizing to get enough signatures to give voters a say. It's Wednesday, July 2nd. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me to break it all down is Melanie Falwell, the Executive Director of Idahoans United for Women and Families. Thanks so much for being here today, Melanie.
Thanks for having me.
To jump right in, can you explain what exactly would the Reproductive Freedom and Privacy Act ballot initiative change for Idahoans, and why is now the moment for it?
So, to put it very succinctly, this initiative would restore Idaho to the standard we lived under for nearly 5 decades, also known as the Roe standard. This initiative does that same thing that was allowed under the Roe standard, which is if you need to access abortion up to fetal viability, that is lawful, and past that in cases of medical emergency, also lawful or decriminalized for both doctors and women. And it ensures that as much as is possible, government interference does not come into the private spaces of exam rooms as doctors, like OBGYNs, try to navigate the complicated, unique, private, often emergent issues around pregnancy. And we have found in our research that most Idahoans, 63%, agree that those kinds of decisions, including abortion related to reproductive health, are best made between a woman and her doctor, not the government or a politician. And I do think that's because that was the norm in Idaho for 50 years. Now, 3 years ago, the anniversary will be in August, Idaho's trigger ban went into effect that changed all that. And now Idaho lives under one of the most extreme abortion bans in the country. Our legislature does have the power to change this. And I think now after 3 sessions under the trigger ban, the ban that they created, nothing has changed. And it seems that nothing will change. Here in Idaho, luckily, we have access guaranteed by our state constitution to the Citizens Ballot Initiative. And in that case, citizens can write their own law, circulate it, put it on the ballot, and we vote on it. And that's exactly what we're doing with the Reproductive Freedom and Privacy Act.
So it would just go to the standard we had before Roe was overturned. So we'd just be living like we did in Idaho circa 2021, right? Like we had more doctors then for sure.
Yeah, we had more doctors then for sure. It would restore us to that standard in just the short amount of time since this ban has been in place. We have lost nearly a quarter of our practicing OBGYNs. It's my understanding that number has gotten worse. And, there's been a lot of interesting additional information showing that it's not just the OBGYNs. We're losing family physicians. We're losing pediatricians. We're losing specialists. We're losing ER docs. And we're finding that these healthcare deserts and strains on the system are getting worse all the time. At a certain point, you're in a hole so deep, you got to stop digging. You got to put down the shovel. Our legislature seems uninterested in that. And in that case, this initiative is sort of forcefully taking away that shovel and starting to build a ladder. It is absolutely an existential threat to the future of this state. We make a joke that it doesn't matter how pretty the mountains are or how good the skiing is. At a certain point, there is not enough to attract talented, qualified people to this state, particularly people of childbearing age or people who love people of childbearing age. It becomes too dangerous, too untenable. Why would you come to a state that criminalizes you being able to care for your patients.
And have medical providers or doctors indicated that if this ballot initiative passed, it would make a difference in their desire to keep working in Idaho or be able to recruit new providers?
We really, when we started drafting the language of the law of the initiative, we worked really closely with providers and said to them, our North Star here is getting care to the people of Idaho. And the way we deliver care is through doctors. So we need feedback from doctors like you. Would this meaningfully fix the problems that we're having? Would this meaningfully do something about this chilling effect? And so, of course, a first key provision is to stop criminalizing doctors for doing their job. It's very strange to have prison threatened, fines, loss of your license, loss of your livelihood. So getting rid of that is a big deal. That is a key thing that this law does. And it is our hope, and the feedback we've received from the physicians who helped draft it is this would meaningfully at least begin to ladder us out of that hole.
And how would this initiative protect medical privacy? I know that there's concerns now with some Supreme Court decisions, with different laws being floated that medical information could be shared with law enforcement across state lines. So how would this ballot initiative work to protect the medical privacy of Idahoans?
This initiative expressly states that it is a law designed to ensure that private medical decisions related to reproductive health, and it's the full gamut. It's everything from birth control to Plan B to vasectomies to in vitro. It would make sure that that information stays between a patient and a doctor or healthcare provider without government interference that is undue. And so it's a key provision of the law. The Idaho Supreme Court pointed that out, and it is in our short title that everybody will see on the ballot when they go to vote, right to privacy.
And can I ask, why did you choose to include protections not just for abortion, but also for contraception and IVF in the same initiative?
That's a great question. There's two parts to it. Number one, these things are all related. They're all intertwined. We have so many stories from folks who have been in medical emergencies and needed access to abortion. They were also on an IVF journey. But number two, it is clear, and this is information that has come from as high as justices on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, all the way down to the party platforms here in our state, to certain very powerful lobbying groups, have signaled a clear desire to ban forms of birth control, to ban Plan B, to invasively regulate IVF to the point that it would probably also be illegal, and even go so far as to make Idaho's ban more extreme. Knowing those pressures and realities are in the environment, we thought it was important to protect things that, yes, are currently legal, but just because they're legal now does not mean they will not be under attack in the future.
Yeah. And I mean, we saw that with Roe. So it sounds like if you're going to do it, we might as well just, blanket cover all the things that could potentially come up.
They're all related, right? The thing about the human body and human health and women's pregnancies, it's complex. It's a complex set of systems. And at the end of the day, legislating healthcare is messy, ineffective, and creates untold consequences constantly. And we're living with those right now. So we tried to be, to the best of our ability in drafting the initiative, empowering doctors to do what is best for their patients and empowering patients to know that they can count on their doctors to give them clear, direct information with the goal of protecting their health and their life and their future.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
Melanie, this initiative has already faced some pushback from state leaders, with the Idaho Supreme Court ruling that Attorney General Labrador and the Division of Financial Management didn't act in good faith when creating a short title and fiscal impact statement for the initiative. What was misleading about it, or what did they get wrong?
So here in Idaho, while we have the power to write the law, what appears on the ballot that everybody votes on is by law decided by the Attorney General and DFM, as you mentioned. Two main components. One is something called titles, a short title and a long, and that is supposed to be a summary of what the bill will do. And the second piece is called a fiscal impact statement, how much it's going to cost if passed. And the law requires that those pieces be clear, concise, comprehensive, and non-prejudicial, that we can't insert political agendas into that language. And when we received our titles and our fiscal impact statement late last year, it was our opinion and the opinion of our attorneys that they were not lawful. They were not meeting that standard that is required by Idaho law. So we filed a lawsuit, and ultimately the Idaho Supreme Court directed the Attorney General and DFM to go back to the drawing board and rewrite things. I feel our short title now is a very succinct, clear summary of the key ways that this law will change Idaho law. That's why we've waited all this time. We wanted to ensure that the language was as clear as possible. Here's the ways that this law will end Idaho's ban and protect a right to privacy and protect doctors and ensure that in the cases of medical emergency and risk to the health of a mother, you can get help. And regarding cost, that this should cost the state of Idaho nothing or next to nothing.
You mentioned earlier that over 2/3 of Idahoans believe that abortion is a deeply personal decision and not something that the government should decide. Given that high percentage, how do you plan to talk to voters about the difference between politicians making medical decisions and doctors making decisions based on evidence-based care for what is best for their patients?
I think what we see in our polling numbers is people intuitively understanding the answer to this fundamental question. Who do you want making decisions for you and your family? You or the government? And I can say as a lifelong Idahoan, born and raised, I think that's a pretty deeply held Idaho value, that I'm in charge of me and my family, not the government. And the idea that some politician is going to come in and make a judgment about what is best is really ludicrous.
And I was really surprised going through your data that many Idahoans also said that they would support someone they know having an abortion, even if they personally disagree with that choice. How do you plan to speak to that group of voters?
One of the things that we're going to be talking a lot about is there is a stigma and an idea of the, quote, type of people who get abortions. Let's challenge some of those ideas. A lot of people don't know that the majority of women who access abortion for a variety of reasons are already mothers. Close to a majority of people who access abortion were using some kind of contraception that failed in some way. That number also speaks to the idea that it's easy to judge and have a hardened heart to an abstract idea of a person or type of person. But on the whole, when it comes to people we know, people we love, people we are in community or relationship with, we are more open to understanding the full humanity of their decision-making, of who they are, And I believe in a time where things are so kind of hopelessly divisive right now, I think it is easy to feel hopeless about our inability to have nuanced conversations about anything. I have a lot of hope in that when we start to talk to people as human beings, as complicated human beings who care about one another, that we can get back to something a little bit better.
And that's definitely something I'm glad to hear you have hope. I maybe sometimes I worry that our world and this state is so conservative, so politically charged and polarized. Do you really think messages like don't impose your view on others will be successful in these nuanced conversations?
We know that 69% of Idahoans agree with the statement. We all have different views, personal views about abortion, but we ought not impose those views on others. I think we're coming up on the 4th of July. I've been thinking a lot about the idea of what America stands for, of what Idaho stands for, of what the idea of our country and state are. And one of those central promises is the ability to live our life, to access personal liberty, to be free from tyranny, and to not live in a theocracy. I think the freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of expression, all of those things are intertwined in this. And I do think that for a lot of Idahoans, they understand that imposition of your personal beliefs on others is a slippery slope to some pretty dangerous stuff. And I have a lot of faith, a lot of hope in my fellow Idahoans that is a shared value.
Melanie, some critics have started to say that this initiative is too broad. It encompasses too many things. What's your response to that?
One of the main lines of attack that we've seen against very similar initiatives in state after state across this country, 17 states, is, well, it just goes too far. It just goes too far. It doesn't. In fact, it just takes us back to where we were. The ban went too far. The ban encompassed too much and took too much away and rendered our doctors helpless, rendered women and families in the kinds of situations you wouldn't wish on anybody. And we hear about all the time, and they will break your heart. The ban went too far. And this policy is actually quite modest in that it just sets us back to the standard we had for nearly 5 decades.
Well, I mean, Idaho is a very conservative, very Republican state. And so if we're talking about going back to the 2021 standard, is that not the Republican standard? Like, is that not like where we were as a state with Republican leadership for decades?
That's fair. But that was, only because Roe was the law of the land and was that kind of backstop. Roe, I think people a little bit took for granted. I've had a lot of people express to me that they took for granted that Roe would always be there and didn't understand the ways that was a safeguard against some pretty terrible circumstances. And there are Republican legislators who sponsored, carried, voted for our trigger ban, who have flatly said, I never thought Roe would fall, so this was a non-issue. And I think that's one of the key problems of passing gestural bills to appease the loudest and most extreme lobbyists and special interests on this issue. You end up with bad, unworkable laws that do a lot of harm.
And you need to get more than 70,000 signatures to get this initiative on the ballot for 2026. And you're actually aiming for 100,000 signatures. What time frame do you have to gather those signatures, and how are you planning to build the framework to make that happen?
Yeah. So in Idaho, to get something on the ballot in even years, you have to gather signatures equal to 6% of registered voters. For us, that's 70,700. We want to do a little better than that, err on the side of caution. So we're shooting for 101,000. And we need to have those into the county clerks by August 30th of 2026. To get that done, we will, of course, need on-the-ground volunteers in every corner of the state. And we have been building that infrastructure during the aforementioned bureaucratic waiting process. We've been building them for months and months. We have 1,000 volunteers. We have trained the vast majority of them. So most of those volunteers are clipboard ready. They are ready to go gather signatures. So we have a lot of time to make up. We need to catch up, and we are well positioned to get that done.
Melanie, what gives you hope that this initiative can succeed in a state like Idaho? Not just in making it on the ballot, but in winning at the polls in 2026?
I think what gives me hope are a couple things. One, from the beginning, we've been collecting research and data and polling to make sure that we were headed in the right direction. We wanted a policy that was built for Idaho, that would help Idaho's problem, that would provide a solution for that problem, powered by Idahoans, funded by Idahoans, steered by Idahoans, for this Idaho problem. So that research has indicated that this is the path and that we have a broad enough majority of Idahoans to get us there. And then two, anecdotally, just talking to people just constantly affirms that hope. I'm from here. I grew up outside Caldwell from a Catholic family, Republican family. And in the conversations I'm having with people, all kinds of people all over the state from very diverse political backgrounds, it is clear to me that this can be something that we've been told for the longest time, that abortion is divisive and this is a third rail lightning rod issue. Well, opportunistic people made it that way. Opportunistic people made something that is a very private, sensitive, I would say economic, I would say healthcare related issue, kitchen table issue into something else. And they exploited that to build power, to gain power, keep the lights on at their organizations. And I just reject that completely. I also am getting the sense that a lot of Idahoans are doing the same. And they're seeing the ways that this is a personal issue, not a political opportunity, and that we can truly right the ship and get back to the standard of personal liberty and medical privacy that we had in this state for most of their lifetimes.
Well, Melanie, we'll have some links in the show notes for listeners who are interested in getting more information or even potentially getting involved. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Selena C.A. Reynolds, Adam Sage, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is the Down Is the, All the Kimonos, and Carl Christensen. Tune in tomorrow for a special all-hosts game show to find out which city is the best place to visit this summer. And we'll be back on Monday with a look at what's changing in the West End. Happy 4th of July, Boise.